Mrs. Town, please call the roll.
Chairman Powers,
Present.
Mayor Schneider,
Present.
Mrs. Sickinger,
Present.
Mr. Hockney,
Present.
Mr. Sewer.
Present.
Moving on to item B in the agenda, the approval of minutes. Do I have any changes to the minutes? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I would like to make a motion to approve the minutes that we received in our packet dated or for the meeting September 7th, 2022.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Mrs. Sickinger. Mrs. Town, please call the roll.
Chairman Powers,
Yes.
Mayor Schneider,
Yes.
Mrs. Sickinger,
Yes.
Mr. Hockney,
Yes.
Mr. Sewer.
Yes.
Moving on to item C, we have a public hearing for a proposed lot split to transfer .032 acres from Vineyard Church, 1759 Mills Avenue, and consolidate onto an adjacent lot owned by Mr. and Mrs. Strecker, 1757 Mills Avenue. Chris Bader for the church, and the Streckers will make a presentation to the commission. Per the Ohio Revised Code, this is regarded as an exempted subdivision, but still requires approval by the Planning Commission. Dan Bly has provided written comments, which were included in your packet. The Planning Commission approves the plan. Staff recommends a connecting Z tie bar be inserted to illustrate the intended lot consolidation. So, I believe we need a motion to go into the public hearing. Is that correct?
You want me?
Make a motion, we go into public hearing?
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Mrs. Town, please call the roll.
Chairman Powers,
Yes.
Mayor Schneider,
Yes.
Mrs. Sickinger,
Yes.
Mr. Hockney,
Yes.
Mr. Sewer.
Yes.
Okay. At this time, I would ask anyone who intends to provide testimony to the commission, please raise your right hand.
Keep it up.
Give it up. Great. If you would, state your name
Raymond Strecker.
and finish with, I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. If you would, please approach.
So this is, of course, a follow-up to the meeting back in October, I believe it was. Yes, October, where I made the initial inquiry as to whether this was a viable option or not, and received confirmation that, as it was proposed, that it was viable. It still had to be approved. So I had the survey done. I had the new legal descriptions drafted, and then submitted that paperwork, multiple copies to the Planning Commission. In case there's any questions, I also have I can get the chairman of the trustee of the church, Vineyard Central Church, on the line. He had to be at work today, but he's available for me to bring on speakerphone if you want to ask questions of him directly, or if you need him to say something to the matter. I didn't really talk to him about that part. I just said, I think they may have some questions for you, so please be available.
Do you have him on right now?
I'll just take a moment. He's expecting my call, so.
Hello, this is Chris. Can I help you?
Yeah, Chris, this is Ray. I'm standing at the podium with the Planning Commission, and I have you on speaker. I'm hoping that it comes through the microphone okay so they can hear you properly. I raised my hand to testify in part of this public hearing about this map amendment. So I was just reviewing what we had done up to date, and then said that, we submitted the application, which was from you and the church, to propose that this transfer of property between adjoining owners would be approved for the map amendment. Do you have anything you want to say to the committee in regard to that as far as your stand on it?
Oh, yes. First of all, thank you for letting me attend by phone. Sorry I can't be there in person. But yes, as chairman of our trustee committee, this is something that I'm submitting so that we can transfer that tract of land from Vineyard Central Church to Ray and Carol Strecker.
Could he please state his name
Oh.
and spell it and his address for the record, please?
For the record, if you would state your name, spell it, and your residence or residence address.
Absolutely. My name is Chris Bader. That's CHRISBAD as in David, ER. And I'm the chairman of our corporation, and my home address is 3532 Saybrook Avenue. That's SAYBROOK, one word. Cincinnati, Ohio. Zip code is 45208.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions from any of the commissioners?
I feel like it's pretty straightforward what we're trying to do and why we want to do it, and we adjusted the boundary line to meet the minimum 10 feet from the closest spot of the building, of the church building, which was one of the requirements, and it still gives us now a total of 10-plus feet from our property line to our house, which we wanted for maintenance work and that. And the 2 trees would then be on our property rather than the church property.
Okay. Anything further?
I don't have any.
Thank you, Mr. Strecker. All right, entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion, we close public hearing.
Mr. Sewer, do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Hockney. Ms. Town, would you please call the roll?
Chairman Powers,
Yes.
Mayor Schneider,
Yes.
Mrs. Sickinger,
Yes.
Mr. Hockney,
Yes.
Mr. Sewer.
Yes.
Okay. Any discussion?
There's nobody in attendance, but we didn't really say during the meeting, is there anybody here for or against? We didn't do the against part. There's nobody else here to speak against it, so I think,
And we did send out notices to the
Okay.
property owners.
Okay.
We also published it in the newspaper.
okay, just a point of clarification. In discussion of this, I mean, Mr. Strecker came and discussed this in front of the Planning Commission, or had really an exploratory discussion with the Planning Commission previously. This is a change of lot boundaries that give him the ability to maintain the property. Apparently he's worked this out with his neighbor, with the church, as we've heard, and I don't see any reason why the Planning Commission wouldn't approve this, but I'm open to-
It seemed, Vic, that from reading all the documents, that the main issue here was the fire rating required of the church building in the future, and by keeping the 10 feet, he's remedied that situation with the church. And
for current zoning and for current use of the building. Now, if there was a change of the building use, there would be could
Correct.
cause a challenge. Meaning if somebody wanted to change it to retail or do something else in that building, but they've got hoops to jump through even to make that change. Okay.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll entertain any motions on that item.
Well, we all have them. May I make a motion?
Mayor Schneider?
Okay. I would make a motion that the Planning Commission approves the proposed lot split for lots 66 and 69, Mills and Klein, on the Klein Third subdivision, as per the survey, subject to the applicant recording the plan at Hamilton County and providing copy of the instrument number and deed transfers to the Norwood Building Department for their records, or our records. That would be in my motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Second by Mrs. Sickinger. Mrs. Town, would you please call the roll?
Chairman Powers,
Yes.
Mayor Schneider,
Yes.
Mrs. Sickinger,
Yes.
Mr. Hockney,
Yes.
Mr. Sewer.
yes.
Moving on to item C2, minor PUD changes. PLK, owner of 4590 Beach Street, Factory 52, has submitted several items for Planning Commission's review and approval. I'd like to offer an opportunity for somebody from PLK to kind of step through these if you'd like to take that opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nicholas Lingenfelter, Chief Development Officer, PLK Communities. You have 3 items in front of you that were requested to be brought for your attention. We gave a brief overview on each one of them. The first one I'll just kind of start with. I don't know what order it was on the agenda. I apologize. I don't have one. But the signage update. So our original PD had a signage plan in it, or a basic signage parameters. At the time, we thought we might need more. We don't. So we intend to comply with everything within the PD. Been working with Mr. Skelly for the past month or two to come up with a chart. So there should be an Excel chart in that file as well that shows you where our signs are at, how they comply. Beyond that, we don't anticipate any changes within Phase 1 of the PD. So it is our opinion that there isn't really anything additional needed on the signage other than just to note that we're in compliance, we're using the PD language, and we're not making any further changes as we had anticipated that we might initially. The second item is the power plant building. There was originally a brewery building in the middle of the park. That building was about 8,000 square foot rough footprint. We're going to actually shrink that footprint to roughly 7,000 square feet. There will be some ground floor retail as well as our community gym. That space is not leased, but what we ended up realizing was to self-sustain or to have that building stand on its own, right now retail rents just can't support it. So we actually located the 2 breweries in 2 different locations on site. We went from 1 to 2, which you have all publicly heard, and those are another retail spaces. Beyond that, we added 8 additional units on, there are actually 1.5-story units inside there, almost identical to the factory. So the overall PUD allows up to 600 units. We're still within that threshold. Overall building heights of residential weren't to exceed 4 stories. I believe it's 73 feet right now for Phase 1. And I believe it was our opinion, it was kind of an update, but it was the request of the building commissioner that we bring that before you for your approval as well. But again, everything that we look at and see appears that it's in compliance with the PD. It's just a difference of what we were using, but the overall use and densities and capacities were already approved in the PD, so we were just shifting where that was located. Finally was the smokestack. If you've noticed, we have a gold spade up on there as well as a blue band. As we got to the smokestack, we're over $250,000 probably in tuck pointing right now and a few other issues. The top 30 feet was significantly failing. It's almost 6 bricks thick. So when we got to that, and I kind of gave some quotes from the structural engineer's report, they came through and wanted a seal coat. What we were able to do was actually find a way to mix the ceiling, so technically what you see up there is part of the ceiling of the brick, and we were able to use that a little bit differently. So because of the timing, because of weather, because of tight time constraints, we didn't have any time between when we found out that that opportunity existed and it was actually after the last planning commission and now. So we had to complete that work within the time window, and it is already done, but that item is before you as well. So with that, I will gladly take any questions, but hopefully everything is okay with you. So.
Any questions for Mr. Lingenfelter?
Oh, I got all sorts of questions. We got all sorts of good ones. May I?
Yes.
All right. Look, first, I guess, starting working backwards, the mural that is on the smokestack is a huge ace that reminds me and pays homage to the Ace brand of playing cards that historically were made at the playing card plant that was there for 100 years. Mm-hmm. Is that's significant? Basically, it's a large ace that pays homage to the history of that plant.
It's a spade, correct. And so typically when you printed a deck of cards, the ace of spades was the mark of the maker. So every individual plant had their own. U.S. playing card had Bicycle, which is the most famous with Lady Liberty and the peace parts. But ultimately what we decided on when we were looking at that was to just put the spade there because the logo that we have would be too difficult and complex to do up at that height. It just didn't make any sense. And then once we build out the next phase along the highway, you wouldn't have caught it anyway. So what we were trying to do is give that iconic marker, almost looked like a flame, but it was an ace of spades, and kind of give us that look. So, and it was done within the sealant materials.
Within sealant material, so you're saying,
PPG made a product and literally mixed 24 karat gold in there for us as part of their sealant, and that's how we made that.
okay.
So, I mean-
So it's twofold, it's really threefold, but I'll say twofold. The mural, the sealant was going to be put on.
Correct.
No matter what.
Had to
It had to be to preserve the upper whatever levels and all that. And
Yes, sir.
then the spade that's on there, okay, I understand how that was done. All right. And that work's completed now?
About 90%. The bottom has been too cold to fix the last, well, probably 40, 50 feet below there. If you go by right, well, you probably can't see it from the street, but there's some openings and spaces left where the actual, I don't know what called the emissions, the smoke would have gone through the chimney, like those holes are, they're not filled in yet because of the weather. We need it to be above 40 degrees, and if they can't get it there soon, we're going to have to tent it. Everything at the top has been done, fully restored. So everything that was a concern that might be a fall hazard has been dealt with.
It's interesting to me that this smokestack's being reconditioned the same time they reconditioned the smokestack from LeBlanc, but they did it two totally different ways. Did any of you guys watch that part of it? It's sort of interesting to see. Okay, that was the only questions I had on sort of the smokestack part and the mural on the smokestack. Go to my next question. Highwire, the brewery that's coming in, the position has changed so that it is correct, or is directly behind the clock tower, which I would think is probably the best position. I don't know how they negotiated that, but that's probably the best position for a brewery right as you walk in. But that building originally was just presented as an amenity building.
It was a mini building with ground floor retail. So our leasing office is the whole second floor. And then what we had looked at was the third floor. At one point, we were like, can it be a wedding venue? Can it be an event space, something else? And as part of their lease, what they negotiated was basically paying us the rent to help subsidize the cost. So to build that glass and steel structure was expensive. So we allow them to seasonally rent the roof. I believe it's like 6 or 7 months a year they have the rent on the roof, which makes the most sense for when it would want to be used. But to put them out in that center area to build a building specifically for them just did not make sense. The same thing with fretboard. Again, for somebody to take on the load of building a multi-million-dollar structure versus trying to use the structure that we were already building anyway. Obviously, our leasing office was there. It is a tenant amenity building. The entire second floor is, as it was designed. That made the most sense to us because we were going to build it anyway. So put them somewhere we're not just taking an additional risk.
All right. And the other question is that I guess you had what was set up as a 7,800 to 8,000 square foot brewery tap room that's now changing to a mixed-use building. And I think you had mentioned there will be apartments in there.
Correct. There's 8 units on the upper floors. So once we got to the actual design phase of that, I believe the original single-story brewery structure was close to 20 feet tall. It was very significant in height, so that probably couldn't have been picked up in some of the initial massings and renderings. What we ended up realizing was, again, to help subsidize some of the retail right now, the 8 apartments, the excess cash flow just helps make it so we can actually rent the space to somebody else at a level that the market's at right now. So construction costs have probably gone up between 40 and 60% in the last 18 months, and we had to find some way to make that work. Also, what you'll notice with the design, which is something we intentionally did, we modeled the site looking at rectangular buildings, everything else, but ultimately, the reason we're called the power plant building was they had a 2.5-story power plant back there before. Much larger scale, went in the smokestack. But when you looked at it at the site, it just made the most sense to almost recreate that in a different form that we could use today. So we could not have used the original building that was there because of a lot of environmental issues. But we can recreate it on a smaller scale, still get that effect. You have the smokestack not too far away, and it kind of helps people still have that tie to the original site.
3-story building, I mean, it's not a walk-up, there'll be
There has to be an
elevators?
elevator, sir. It's a very, 140,000.
Yeah,
It's a lot of money for 8 units, so.
it's an expensive change.
But again, fortunate because the rental rates of apartments where they're at today, it helps apply additional money to help pay for the first floor.
Those were really the only questions I had.
Other questions? Mr. Lingenfelter, would you clarify what the internal square footage is of the new building versus the old building, the power plant building?
I want to say it shrunk just shy of 1,000 square feet, is that right, Brandon? Yeah, so 7,200 square feet roughly right now on the first floor. I believe the leasable retail space is just under 5,000 square feet. The other amenity gym space is around 2,000 or so, 1,800, 2,000, and you've got your kind of common spots. But overall, the original was, I want to say 8,100, we're in the 7,000s now. So
Okay.
we're slightly smaller.
And what will the square footage be with, not just the retail, but the retail and the living components?
We looked at that yesterday, it was like 18 to 20,000? 20,000.
Okay. I think that's the only question I had. Thank you.
Pass it.
Okay. Mr. Skelly, is there anything that you'd like to add or comment on?
No,
as far as this?
I believe in your package, you should have a memo from me with regards to the items for PLK. So I don't know if you have any questions on those, the memo itself.
Great. Thank you. Any additional discussion?
Yeah. I think, as I was looking, that these are minor PUD changes, minor planned urban development changes, which we approve on this level. All three of these are considered minor changes. The mural, and I know we're looking at this saying that we potentially would approve the use of 2 murals. I guess I would question whether it's 2 murals or whether it's one big mural on the smokestack, or is it really 2 murals or one? I guess there's a north and a south facing, so I would look at that as one. And then the change to where the breweries are, and I think we've constantly been told that this development is going to sort of evolve as they secured the people that would be coming in, the businesses that would be coming in. So I'm excited that Highwire is coming in. That's, sort of, I consider that to be sort of locally owned. And so that's an interesting aspect of it too. So those are my comments. That's all I have.
Any further comments? Seeing none, I'll entertain any motions on the topic.
I would like to make a motion. I think there needs to be 3 motions. So my first motion would be, I recommend that the Planning Commission approves the use of the mural, or 2 murals, painted on the top of the existing smokestack.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Mrs. Town, would you please call the roll?
Chairman Powers,
Yes.
Mayor Schneider,
Yes.
Mr. Hockney,
Yes.
Mrs. Sickinger,
Yes.
Mr. Sewer.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. Additional motions?
Want me to keep going?
Keep going.
Keep going.
Got it.
The second motion would be that I recommend that the Planning Commission approves the proposed signage on what is called the amenity building that we received, the perpendicular sign. This is the high wire signage that we received drawings of for that building. So I recommend we approve the signage provided on the amenity building.
Do I have a second?
Second. Oh, go ahead.
Seconded by Mr. Sewer. Mrs. Town, please call the roll.
Chairman Powers,
Yes.
Mayor Schneider,
Yes.
Mrs. Sickinger,
Yes.
Mr. Hockney,
Yes.
Mr. Sewer.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
No, could I ask a quick question?
Yes.
On that item, and ask this of the developer, just real quick. I know that PUDs evolve.
Yes.
So this development's evolving. I don't really have any issues with that. Just curious, how close do you believe the signage is to what will be there?
So what I would say is the majority of the signage is actually integral into the property. So we've elected not to name the apartments another apartment. It's the apartments at Factory 52. But in order to do that, we actually have and it's in your signage package, it's called literally a tall deck of cards being made by an artist in California that's 14 foot tall. As part of that, what we actually did was on that deck of cards, it was our logo. So we tried to make sure that like you're not just seeing signage everywhere other than what the tenants physically want. So the food hall will just say gather all outside, just like that's been approved. And then other than that, the retail bays are 2 foot by 3 foot blade signs that are hand painted. Like we wanted that traditional look. So from what was actually in the PUD, we actually thought we were going to have significantly more. The PUD and the zoning actually governs what's visual, I believe, from Beach Street only. So for the most part, like that's where we realized like we don't even need additional signage. We are fully compliant with the code.
Okay.
So we had put the code in our PUD and said we'd come back anticipating we would vary. And now that we've done it, we've got that chart we're all tracking to now going, do we think we'll need anything else? At this point, I just don't think we will. I mean, you're going to have building numbers, but we're not naming each building.
Got it.
So it's going to be we're really trying to make it be subtle.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Skelly.
Question for the applicant. So with regards, when you mentioned the, for lack of a better word, the art cards, would they be similar to almost like a sandwich board where you could use as a wayfinding, saying, you know, you'll have the cards together and saying this way to Jenny's Ice Cream or this way to parking, you know?
So for the most part, we're not doing that in the front of the property.
Okay.
So will there be wayfinding? Yes, as you leave the 2 parking garages, or if you leave the surface parking, that will be contained within the property. The only wayfinding that's still kind of an open item in our mind is, you know, how do we route people to the garages? But that's why we attach the sign package in the back where you can see the typical signage dimensions, what parking might look like. So it'll be within everything you see in the back. Everything will comply with that.
But to be more definitive, so those arts, whatever.
That's
cards will
14
not be
foot
used
tall
as
and about
any
20 foot
signage.
wide. So it's huge. Like I don't think it's not just a sandwich board. It is a piece of art.
Yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
was saying.
So yeah, you're not really going to change that.
Thank you. Okay. Any additional motions?
I'll keep going, I guess. I would make a motion for the development of a 3-story, and this is the mixed-use commercial and residential building containing 8 apartment units, square footage of 18,564 feet, as per the plan submitted, dated 10/26/22, for 2745 Park Avenue. So this is the building that is what used to be what was considered the power plant building, as Mr. Lingenfelter mentioned, that was connected to the smokestack, so in that area. My motion is to approve the development of a 3-story mixed-use commercial and residential building containing 8 apartments.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Hockney. Mrs. Town, please call the roll.
Chairman Powers,
Yes.
Mayor Schneider,
Yes.
Mrs. Sickinger,
Yes.
Mr. Hockney,
Yes.
Mr. Sewer.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. This moves us on to item D, old business. No items were submitted. Moving on to item E, new business. No items were submitted. Any items to be added? Seeing none, we'll move on to item F, adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Sewer. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Mrs. Sickinger. Mrs. Town, would you please call the roll?
Chairman Powers,
Yes.
Mayor Schneider,
Yes.
Mrs. Sickinger,
Yes.
Mr. Hockney,
Yes.
Mr. Sewer.
Yes.
We are adjourned at 4 p.m. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, gentlemen, for attending.